Hey guys, today we are going to be reading Chapter 2 of Fortune Falls by Jenny Goebel. This video is being posted with permission from Scholastic Inc. Chapter 2, Knock on Wood. I left the girls' bathroom just in time to get caught in the small crowd of unluckies slipping in through the side entrance of the school. I couldn't help but notice the way they stumbled along with their snotty noses, stained shirts, and band-aids galore. Was this a glimpse of my not-so-distant future? One unlucky student stepped on another's shoelace, and it started a chain reaction as a group of them tumbled like dominoes. That was why they used a separate entrance and had a later start time, so that they wouldn't hinder the other students. The idea was for the unluckies to have as little contact with everyone else as possible until they were shipped off to Baines School for luckless adolescents next fall. The Lucky's parents made a huge fuss whenever they thought their fortuitous children were being jeopardized by an unlucky. Sometimes even parents of undetermined kids complained. Rumor was that Felicia Kahn's mother and father had registered 137 complaints so far this year. Most of their calls had been about me. They claimed I was a danger to everyone around me. At least that's what they said at the beginning of the school year, right after I was blamed for the collapse of the gym bleachers. They'd made a big to-do about the whole thing, even though faulty welding could have explained why it crumbled when I leaned on it. No one was too seriously injured, thankfully, and the goose egg on Felicia's forehead went away after about a week. So really, they should have forgiven me for it by now. Still, the Khans had blabbered to anyone who would listen that I should be identified as unlucky right away instead of waiting for the spring test. Let's be honest, I'd overheard Felicia's mom saying to Principal Lyon. Sadie was born on Friday the 13th, and her birthday lands on Friday, March 13th, again this year. Shouldn't that tell us something? I stopped in the middle of the hall and let the downtrodden pack sweep ahead of me. One more week, I reminded myself. I wasn't officially one of them yet. I had one more week to increase my luck before I'd have to prove to everyone that I wasn't such a menace to society. Everything could happen in a week. Anything could happen in a week. Maybe, by some miracle, I could pass the test and go on to flourish with my best friend Cooper and all the other Luckies. Then I looked down and saw a patch of mud on my sleeve that I hadn't been able to wash out. Who was I trying to fool? I was destined for Baines. With my shoulders slumped, I continued down the hall and turned the knob to open Mrs. Swinton's classroom door. I held my breath and barged right in. If a lifetime of mishap and embarrassment had taught me anything, it was the quicker you got the discomfort over with, the better. As expected, every single undetermined student turned to look at me as Mrs. Swinton sighed loudly. In a voice that wasn't entirely unsympathetic, she said, "What was it this time, Sadie? Were you chased by a swarm of bees? Did you fall down an open manhole again?" "Sorry, Mrs. Swinton, But as soon as I opened my mouth, she cut me off. "Look, Sadie, since you know something is going to happen to you on the way to school, can you at least try to leave earlier?" Mrs. Swinton's head hardly reached above the podium she stood behind. Nothing about her, from her close-cropped gray hair to her long flowered skirt, seemed imposing. Yet the tight pinch to her lips and the edge, quite common in her voice, said she was a force to be reckoned with. "Please take your seat." I nodded as I hurried past her, then scooted by 4 rows of desks. Fewer than half of the desks were occupied, since most of our classmates had already been sorted into luckies and unluckies. Felicia whispered something to Betsy and Sabrina, and the three of them giggled. When I slid into my seat at the far back corner of the room, almost toppling my chair over backward in the process, Betsy stopped laughing. Felicia's and Sabrina's snickers grew into guffaws. Mrs. Swinton cleared her throat. All 3 girls sat up, tall and studious-like, and I dropped my gaze to the empty desk next to mine, the one where my best friend used to sit. I tried to picture his friendly face in a place of scornful glares Felicia shot when the teacher wasn't looking. Cooper could do a terrific impression of a Lucky. If I was feeling low, he'd throw his arms up in mock indignation and say something like, I didn't win that contest I forgot to enter. I'm having such a bad day. Or, can you believe the PTO president gave me chocolate cake for winning the cakewalk? Doesn't he know lemon poppy seed is my favorite? Then Cooper would draw his lips into a pout and wait until I cracked. It wouldn't matter how painful or embarrassing my day had been up to that point. In spite of myself, I'd laugh. If only Cooper were still undetermined. No, I didn't mean that. I was glad he'd passed the winter test. I hadn't been sure that he would. Just now that he was with the Luckies all day, I missed him terribly. And at least Felicia pretended to be nice when Cooper was around. Mrs. Swinton stepped up to the whiteboard and I snapped back to attention. It took me a minute to realize what she was doing. She was drawing a horseshoe in the upper right-hand corner of the board. As you are all aware, the spring luck test will take place next Monday, 1 week from today, she said. I'll add a horseshoe every day. After we have 7 of them, it will of course be the day of the test. 7 was a lucky number. 7 lucky horseshoes. For the fall test, she'd drawn rainbows, 4-leaf clovers for the winter one. It was a daily reminder to do everything we could to increase our luck between now and then. I've been blowing on my lucky dice every night before bed, a boy named Manuel whispered to another boy, Nathan Small. Nathan's eyes flicked in Manuel's direction, but he seemed too filled with worry to speak. You can't even use your own dice on the test, stupid, Sabrina interjected. I know, but that's enough, Mrs. Swenson said reproachfully. I just hope that all of you remember to use your birthday wishes wisely and didn't squander them away on frivolous things. At this, Nathan buried his face in his hands, and I recalled him bragging about a new gaming system after he turned 12 last month. Quite a few other students were fidgeting in their seats. There were more fingers crossed than I could quickly count. Most of the squirmers were ones I would have expected to be nervous, like me. However, the beads of sweat on Betsy Williams' freckled forehead surprised me. I double-checked the birthday calendar pinned to the wall. Nope, my name was the only one written in smudged black dry erase marker for this week. That meant, considering all the anxiety hanging in the air, a good number of students had wasted their wishes when they turned 12, or perhaps they hadn't been able to make their wishes at all. I knew far too well how difficult it could be to blow out all your candles, no matter how seriously you took the task. My stomach muscles constricted, and my heart pounded in my chest. Not this year. This year I had to earn my wish, even if my birthday did land on Friday the 13th. Then I had to use my wish to pass the luck test. I just had to. If I didn't, if I failed the test and was sent to Baines, I didn't even want to think about what that would be like. My blood pulsed even harder as Mrs. Swenson launched into a speech we'd heard 2 times already, when she was prepping the students who'd taken the fall and winter test. I think it was supposed to be inspiring, but really, it only fueled my sensation of falling off of a cliff. Especially when she said things like, pass the test and you will prosper, fail and you will find nothing but a lifetime of desolation. Then I made the mistake of glancing at Felicia and Sabrina. The 2 of them were leaning back in their chairs, smirking, and purposefully stretching out their graceful swan arms, as if to show that they were above such ridiculousness as finger crossing. Those 2 had so much good kismet it was coming out of their ears. In Felicia's case, literally. Dangly jade earrings hung like teardrops near the delicate slopes of Felicia's jawbones, accented even more by her high, sleek black ponytail. In Fortune Falls, jade costs more than diamonds, but so did a lot of things. 4-leaf clovers, horseshoes, and rabbit's feet, just to name a few. All Felicia would have to do was show up for the luck test in those lucky earrings, and she'd breeze right through. She'd probably even used her birthday wish on the matching new cashmere sweater she was wearing and thought nothing of it. Mrs. Swenson's lips pursed at the corners as she said, but I'm sure none of you have anything to worry about. You'll all do just fine on your upcoming tests. The air tingled with energy as every single student formed a tight fist and rapped their knuckles on the wood 3 times in perfect unison. No one dared to flat out ignore the bold statement, but some took it more lightly than others. Simon Swift yawned into his basketball shooting hand while knocking with the other. Felicia and Sabrina rolled their eyes. The less confident among us, anyone who had poor luck to begin with, as well as those on the fringe who might have botched their birthday wishes, performed the ritual with such intense reverence it seemed almost like a prayer. Mrs. Swenson gave a quick, approving nod of her head and then got down to business. Now, who can tell me what 567,690 divided by 894 is? Like most everyone else, I immediately began rummaging through my desk for a pencil and a sheet of paper. But Felicia's hand shot straight up into the air. Felicia? Mrs. Swenson said. 635? Felicia gave her answer in such a way that it was clear she was just plucking a number out of her head. Then excitedly she added, Am I right? Yes, Felicia. Lucky guess, Mrs. Swinton said flatly. The rest of us dropped our pencils. Okay, why don't we try taking out our math books instead? Please find page 203 and complete problems 1 through 30. I know it's weird, but getting started on the assignment was a relief. It loosened my stomach muscles and slowed my heartbeat. For the first time all morning, I felt somewhat at ease. I couldn't make random guesses and get the answers right the way Felicia could, but schoolwork typically came easy to me. It wasn't all murky like fate and luck and superstitions. It had right and wrong answers. And grades, for the most part, weren't determined by what charms you owned or whether or not you toppled over the salt shaker at breakfast. Throwing myself completely into the problems at hand, those of the long division variety, I was almost able to forget about my birthday on Friday, and the test next Monday, and the fact that Cooper's parents were being swayed by the cons and already didn't want him hanging out with me. I could almost forget about all the bad things that had happened to me and the people I loved, and that a year from now I'd probably be living at Baines, only able to see Petey and my mom every now and then. And as for my dog and Cooper, I'd probably never get to see either of them. I could almost forget about all the ways my terrible luck was threatening to sink me. Almost. Right before we were supposed to head to the cafeteria, Mrs. Swinton said, Felicia Kahn and Sadie Bleecker, I'd like to see both of you after everyone else leaves for lunch. I was more surprised than worried. Felicia and I were hardly ever clumped together. In a daze, I wandered toward Miss Swinson's desk as the room emptied out. From the way Felicia was examining the muddy spots on my clothing and then turning her nose up in the air, I'd have to say appalled was a better word than surprised for what she was feeling. Ladies, Mrs. Swinton said after the door shut, I've graded the quizzes you took last week. Congratulations, you've both qualified for the school spelling bee. What? Felicia said sharply. How did she qualify? Honestly, I wasn't even offended. I was sort of wondering the same thing. Mrs. Swinton raised an eyebrow. Don't confuse an aptitude for spelling with luck, Felicia. When is it? I asked. I felt stunned, sickened even. This Thursday, Mrs. Swinton said. There will be 2 representatives from every homeroom. It will take place in the gym in front of the entire school, and the winner will move on to the District B taking place next month. Unluckies too? Felicia asked, the look on her face growing more revolted. Mrs. Swinton sighed. No, of course not, Felicia. Only luckies and students who are undetermined. But the teacher held up her hand. Sadie is still undetermined, just like you. However, I'm afraid that any contestant who fails the luck test will be automatically disqualified and will not be allowed to participate next month at districts. It was harsh, but I understood. It'd be too dangerous for a real unlucky, not just an undetermined like me, to be around that many other kids, no matter how great they were at spelling. So really, what you're saying is that our classroom only has one true competitor. Felicia's grimace relaxed, and her mouth spread into an arrogant smile. She knew I had no chance of passing the test. That's not what I'm saying at all, Mrs. Swinton replied, with a finality that left no room for argument. Now the 2 of you should go to lunch. I hung back as Felicia promenaded out of the room. She made my blood boil. I knew I was a better speller than she was, but I'd stopped wanting to be on any